Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes, emotional intensity, and situations that may not be suitable for all audiences. It explores complex relationships and tension-filled scenarios. The content is fictional and intended purely for entertainment purposes. Reader discretion is strongly advised. It was a quiet evening in a bustling suburban town, where the soft hum of life outside contrasted with the tension quietly brewing inside. The main characters, carefully drawn individuals with distinct personalities, are introduced in their natural surroundings, highlighting their daily routines and subtle quirks. One of them, Alex, a determined and slightly restless figure in their late 20s, is preparing for what seems like an ordinary night. Their friend, Casey, equally intriguing but more impulsive, is already present, creating a dynamic tension that hints at unspoken chemistry. The room itself, warm lighting, scattered personal items, and the faint scent of evening rain seeping through the windows, sets a tone of intimacy and anticipation. Through small interactions, laughter, and shared glances, the reader senses the comfort and trust existing between them, while a subtle undercurrent of curiosity and desire begins to form. Background details, like a muted television in the corner, the soft ticking of a wall clock, and the distant sounds of the neighborhood settling into night, create a realistic environment that makes the characters' actions and emotions relatable. The narrative emphasizes their internal monologues, revealing fleeting thoughts of boredom, longing, and the anticipation of something different breaking the monotony. This section carefully balances normalcy with the first hints of tension, laying the foundation for the drama and intensity to follow. It also introduces secondary elements that will become important later: their environment, shared history, and small gestures that carry emotional weight. As the characters move through this evening, their dialogue teases a deeper connection, a mix of playful banter and subtle innuendos, allowing the audience to sense that the upcoming hours will disrupt the familiar flow of their lives. By the end of this section, the stage is fully set, the scene feels alive and tangible, the characters' relationships are defined, and the audience is left with an expectant curiosity, eager to witness the events that will unfold in the next part of the story. Every small detail, from body language to tone of voice, is carefully crafted to build a natural yet charged atmosphere, establishing the perfect prelude to the intense, 3-hour journey hinted at in the title. As the evening progressed, the calm atmosphere that had filled the room began to shift subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. Alex and Casey were engrossed in light conversation, the kind that drifts between memories, small jokes, and idle curiosity. Then, without warning, the doorbell rang, a sharp, unexpected sound that cut through their comfort like a sudden gust of wind. Neither of them had expected a visitor, and the sudden intrusion created a brief moment of hesitation, a pause heavy with anticipation. When Alex opened the door, a figure stood there, someone whose presence carried an electric tension, unfamiliar yet strangely compelling. The visitor's eyes locked with theirs in a way that immediately demanded attention, and for a split second, the room felt smaller, more charged. Dialogue became sparse as the characters reacted instinctively, curiosity, apprehension, and an unspoken pull mingling in the air. Casey's eyes narrowed slightly, studying the visitor with a mix of suspicion and intrigue, while Alex felt a subtle flutter of adrenaline, a mix of excitement and caution that prickled under their skin. The encounter was brief, almost fleeting, but it planted a seed, a question of what might happen next, an unspoken invitation into the unknown. Even simple gestures, like the visitor's hand brushing against the doorframe or a quiet laugh that carried just a hint of challenge, amplified the tension and made the atmosphere charged with possibility. The narrative focuses on the sensory experience, the warmth of the room contrasting with the cool air outside, the way the visitor's presence seems to shift the energy of the space, and the heightened awareness of sound, touch, and glance between the characters. This moment, seemingly ordinary, becomes a turning point because it disrupts the familiar rhythm of their night, introducing unpredictability and a thrill of potential chaos. The reader begins to sense that this encounter is more than just a chance meeting. It is the spark that will ignite the intense events to come. Every glance, hesitation, and subtle motion carries significance, revealing layers of desire, curiosity, and tension that had been quietly building. By the end of this section, the characters are no longer just in their comfort zone. They are on the precipice of an experience that will challenge boundaries and change the dynamic of the evening completely. The unexpected visitor leaves a lingering effect, an invisible charge in the air, making it impossible for the characters to return to their previous state of calm, while the audience is left eager and tense, knowing that the next hours will be defined by escalating intensity. After the initial shock of the unexpected visitor, the room's atmosphere shifted noticeably, thickening with anticipation and unspoken desire. The three individuals, Alex, Casey, and the newcomer, began to interact more closely, their conversation laced with subtle double meanings and playful challenges that hinted at a deeper connection forming in real time. Every glance carried weight, every movement became charged with possibility. Alex felt a rising tension in their chest, a mix of excitement and apprehension that made it difficult to focus, while Casey's eyes lingered on the newcomer, curiosity mingled with a cautious thrill. The narrative emphasizes the internal thoughts and sensory experiences of the characters, the way a brush of hands across a table sends shivers, the subtle changes in tone of voice that reveal hidden emotions, the quickened heartbeat that mirrors the building suspense. Ordinary actions, a laugh, a shift in seating, a deliberate pause before speaking, took on new significance, making every moment feel loaded and unpredictable. The tension is not just physical, but deeply psychological, exploring the push and pull of attraction, trust, and the temptation of boundaries waiting to be tested. The newcomer's presence acts as a catalyst, exposing vulnerabilities and desires that had been simmering beneath the surface, and the audience is drawn into the intimate dynamics unfolding before them. Descriptive language captures the intensifying energy, the flicker of candlelight reflecting off eyes, the warmth of the room mingling with the heat of emotion, and the subtle, almost imperceptible signs of nervous excitement that ripple through gestures and posture. Dialogue becomes sharper, sometimes teasing, sometimes probing, revealing character traits and building suspense simultaneously. The story lingers on moments that might otherwise be overlooked, making the tension palpable. The way Alex's hand hovers too long near the visitor, Casey's sudden intake of breath at a joke that carries more than humor, the silent acknowledgments that pass between glances. By the end of this section, the ordinary reality of their evening has been completely transformed. The 3 hours hinted at in the title begin to feel imminent, their anticipation mounting as the characters navigate the fine line between restraint and indulgence. The reader is kept on edge, feeling every subtle shift in energy, every beat of hesitation or bold move, knowing that the intensity will only increase. This section serves as the bridge between the calm, controlled introduction and the fully immersive, unstoppable 3-hour experience that is about to unfold, ensuring the audience is emotionally invested and eagerly anticipating the next stage of the story. The atmosphere, already thick with tension, shifted once again as the characters began testing limits, both external and internal. The room seemed smaller now, charged with a sense of daring as each interaction pushed the boundaries of familiarity and restraint. Alex felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with apprehension, an intoxicating combination that made every glance, gesture, and word feel electrifying. Casey, normally more composed and controlled, revealed an impulsive side, drawn out by the newcomer's bold energy and the heightened emotional stakes of the moment. The narrative focuses on the character's internal conflict, desires battling caution, curiosity sparking moments of boldness, and the subtle ways trust is negotiated in real time. The newcomer's presence acts as both a mirror and a challenge, reflecting hidden desires and daring the others to step beyond the ordinary, to explore connections they had only imagined. Sensory details are crucial here: the warmth of skin in close proximity, the quickened rhythm of breathing, and the subtle shifts in posture that speak louder than words. Every movement carries meaning: a hand lingering slightly too long, a brush of a shoulder, a whispered suggestion, all become milestones in this delicate dance of temptation and risk. The story emphasizes emotional as well as physical boundaries, exploring how vulnerability, curiosity, and suppressed desire intersect in moments of heightened intimacy. Dialogue is intentionally loaded, filled with subtext and double meanings that heighten the suspense and the emotional intensity. By acknowledging and then subtly crossing social and personal boundaries, the characters experience a thrill that is as much psychological as it is visceral. The tension escalates steadily, with each small step forward deepening the connection between them and simultaneously amplifying the stakes. The narrative explores how trust and risk intermingle. Every decision carries consequences, yet the pull of excitement is irresistible. By the end of this section, the characters have fully crossed a threshold. The ordinary rules of interaction no longer apply, and the room is saturated with an energy that promises an immersive, unstoppable journey. The stage is now set for the titular 3-hour experience, as the boundaries once respected are intentionally blurred or discarded, leaving only the raw, unfiltered intensity of the moment. Readers are left feeling the weight of risk, the thrill of audacity, and the anticipation of what comes next, fully primed for the crescendo of the story to unfold in the following section. Every detail, movement, glance, breath, is calibrated to convey the heightened stakes and emotional charge, ensuring the audience is deeply immersed and invested in the unfolding drama. The energy that had been building for hours now reached its peak as the characters became fully absorbed in the intensity of the moment. Time seemed to dissolve, each minute stretching into an eternity as their interactions became a continuous, unbroken flow of emotion, tension, and heightened sensation. Alex, Casey, and the newcomer moved through the room with a rhythm that was almost instinctual, guided by the invisible pulse of shared anticipation and connection. Every glance, touch, and gesture was amplified, resonating with a sense of urgency and exhilaration. The narrative focuses less on external events and more on the internal experiences of the characters, their racing thoughts, the rapid-fire emotions, the mixture of thrill, fear, and desire that colors every moment. Physical proximity heightened awareness, even the simplest movement, reaching for a drink, adjusting posture, or a shift in seating took on new significance in this charged environment. Their interactions were uninterrupted, a seamless continuum of daring, curiosity, and engagement, testing the limits of endurance and emotional vulnerability. Dialogue and unspoken communication flowed together, conveying understanding, challenge, and temptation simultaneously. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, like a storm barely restrained, with tension crackling in every pause, every hesitant touch, and every lingering look. The narrative emphasizes the psychological impact. The characters are stretched beyond ordinary experience, discovering facets of themselves and each other that had remained hidden. As the hours passed, the boundaries that had been tested earlier were now fully abandoned, replaced with a raw, immersive focus on the shared experience. Time lost its usual structure. The characters were entirely present, driven by the force of the moment rather than any external measure. The story conveys the intensity without explicit detail, focusing instead on emotion, reaction, and the cumulative effect of sustained engagement. Readers feel the depth of connection, the oscillation between control and surrender, and the profound sense of exhilaration and vulnerability that comes from pushing limits in unison. By the end of this section, the characters are emotionally and physically spent, their relationships and perceptions transformed by the continuous, unrelenting experience. The audience is left feeling the weight of the moment, fully immersed in the intensity, and ready to witness the aftermath, the consequences, revelations, and reflections that follow such a consuming period of interaction. This section serves as the climax of the story, capturing the essence of the title and delivering on the promise of a relentless, unforgettable 3-hour journey. As the unrelenting 3-hour experience finally came to a close, a palpable shift filled the room. The intensity that had consumed Alex, Casey, and the newcomer gradually gave way to a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and a strange afterglow. The characters slumped into the surrounding furniture, their bodies still buzzing with the residue of heightened emotions. Breathing was heavier, movements slower, and even the quiet moments felt saturated with reflection. The narrative focuses on the immediate physical and emotional reactions, a racing heart slowing down, muscles unwinding, and the quiet moments of self-awareness that follow a period of extreme intensity. The room, once alive with energy and anticipation, now felt heavy with the weight of what had transpired, a mixture of satisfaction, apprehension, and subtle tension. Alex's mind raced, processing the boundaries that had been crossed, the choices made, and the feelings stirred by the unbroken span of shared experiences. Casey's expressions were equally complex, a mixture of exhilaration, lingering uncertainty, and a dawning recognition of consequences that might ripple forward. The newcomer, now calmer yet introspective, seemed aware that the events had irrevocably altered the dynamics among them. Dialogue shifted from teasing and charged exchanges to thoughtful, sometimes awkward conversation as the characters began to confront the reality of their actions. The narrative emphasizes both the internal and relational consequences. Trust had been tested, vulnerabilities exposed, and emotions laid bare in ways that could not be easily undone. Sensory details, like the lingering warmth in the room, the faint scent of exertion, and the subtle sounds of breath and movement, anchor the scene in realism, making the aftermath tangible. Beyond the immediate physical reactions, there is also a psychological reckoning. Each character must confront what the experience revealed about themselves, their desires, and their relationships with one another. Feelings of guilt, satisfaction, exhilaration, and uncertainty intermingle, creating a complex emotional landscape that challenges their understanding of boundaries and self-control. The audience witnesses the shift from unrestrained engagement to quiet introspection, feeling the emotional weight of the consequences alongside the characters. By the end of this section, it becomes clear that while the action may have stopped, the impact of those 3 hours will continue to shape relationships, perceptions, and decisions in the days to come. This part of the story serves as a crucial transition, moving from the peak of intensity to the reflective aftermath, preparing the reader for the next stage, revelations, conflicts, and the emotional ripples that will define the next chapter of their journey. The silence that settled after the 3 hours was fragile, almost deceptive, because beneath it lay a storm of emotions waiting to erupt. What began as unspoken tension soon transformed into words, raw, unfiltered, and sometimes sharper than intended. Alex, unable to contain the whirlpool of feelings, admitted to a vulnerability that had been masked for years, a truth that the night's intensity had ripped open. Casey, caught between admiration and confusion, struggled to reconcile what had just happened with the bond they thought was unshakable. The newcomer, though outwardly calm, revealed subtle cracks, moments of honesty that showed this experience had been just as transformative and unsettling for them. The narrative zeroes in on the emotional revelations, each confession peeling back layers of guarded hearts and hidden desires. What was once an unbroken connection now threatened to unravel under the weight of honesty. Conversations grew heavier, questions were asked that could not be answered simply. Words like, "Why now? What does this mean? And was it real, or just the moment?" hung in the air, piercing the fragile balance between them. Emotions clashed, guilt against desire, fear against longing, and loyalty against temptation, each one pulling the characters in different directions. Body language mirrored the storm, pacing across the room, hands clenched, voices rising then breaking into silence. The intensity that had bound them together for 3 hours now threatened to divide them. Yet, within the conflict, there were revelations that couldn't be ignored, deep-seated truths about who they were, what they wanted, and how much they had hidden from themselves and each other. Trust, once pushed to its limits, teetered on the edge of breaking entirely. Casey, often the voice of reason, found themselves questioning whether what happened was betrayal or discovery. Alex, torn between fear of judgment and relief at finally being seen, struggled to explain feelings that had long been buried. And the newcomer, once the catalyst of it all, now stood at a crossroads, either an intruder in a bond too sacred to alter or a mirror reflecting truths that needed to surface. The atmosphere was no longer charged with desire, but with emotional intensity, an interrogation of hearts, loyalties, and the cost of crossing lines that could never be redrawn. The reader is pulled into this conflict, feeling the sting of harsh words, the weight of silence, and the ache of truths too heavy to ignore. By the end of this section, the relationships among the three hang precariously in balance, with no guarantee of survival. The audience understands that the knight's revelations may either destroy everything or lead to a new, uncharted path. This chapter is the emotional climax, where the real consequences are laid bare and the fragile fabric of connection is tested like never before. As dawn crept through the blinds, the dim light cast a softer glow over the room, revealing faces marked by fatigue, contemplation, and an unspoken need for clarity. The storm of conflict from the night before had quieted, leaving behind a fragile stillness, as if the very air hesitated to disturb the fragile state of their bond. Alex, sitting near the window, gazed out at the first signs of morning, the silence in their heart no longer heavy but reflective. They thought of how the night had stripped away every barrier, exposing truths that were as painful as they were liberating. Casey, on the other hand, leaned back against the couch, their arms folded tightly across their chest, as if holding themselves together in the aftermath of revelations too big to process at once. Yet beneath the guarded posture was a spark of resilience, the realization that honesty, no matter how brutal, could also be a foundation for growth. The newcomer, quieter than before, chose words carefully, acknowledging the role they had played not only in igniting desire, but in forcing Alex and Casey to confront realities long avoided. Their presence, once disruptive, now carried a strange sense of closure, almost as if they had been the catalyst fate required to break open truths hidden beneath the surface. The narrative here focuses on introspection, the way silence carries meaning, and how reflection begins to turn pain into perspective. Dialogue is softer, less confrontational, but laden with sincerity. Apologies are exchanged, not as a way to erase what happened, but to recognize the humanity within the mistakes. The characters grapple with choices, whether to cling to what they had, reshape it into something new, or walk away entirely. The tension eases into acceptance, not because everything is resolved, but because the night has already altered them beyond return. They each acknowledge that what happened for those 3 hours will remain unforgettable, not simply for its intensity, but for the truths it unearthed. Alex feels lighter, despite uncertainty, realizing that the silence they once carried inside has been replaced with a newfound clarity. Casey, though still conflicted, begins to see strength in vulnerability, a chance to redefine loyalty and connection in a way that feels authentic rather than assumed. The newcomer, sensing their role in this journey has reached its natural end, prepares to leave, but not without leaving behind words that echo, reminders that discovery often comes wrapped in chaos. By the story's end, the morning light symbolizes renewal, a reminder that endings are also beginnings. The characters part ways or remain connected, changed forever by what they shared. The reader is left with a lingering sense of bittersweet reflection. The night that seemed endless has given way to a new day, carrying the weight of memories, regrets, and possibilities. The final note is not one of despair but of acceptance, an acknowledgement that sometimes life's most intense experiences are not about permanence, but about transformation, about the way 3 hours can redefine an entire understanding of self, love, and connection. 100.